Right, to begin this texture play on your experimentation pad, you have to make sure that your geisha is completely dry, because we are going to be scratching on this material, and we're going to be using some implements to create texture. You don't want this undercoat to be wet in any way, because then this experiment and class won't work. So what I've used is the black matte geisha from Dala. What I like about it, it does have a bit of a chalky finish, so that is really excellent. It is a product of South Africa, so I don't know if you will find this overseas. I do provide links in the description of this video, but do see what you can find in your local art supply store as far as geisha is concerned. So I'm also using normal white geisha, but for this class I need a bit of a contrast. If you cannot find any black geisha, you can just use ordinary black acrylic paint, and then first do an initial layer of the black paint and allow that to dry. That will also work. I'm just using this black geisha over this acrylic pad because it gives me a bit of grit. It feels a little bit more chalky, and I want to have the highest contrast possible so that you guys can understand the principles that I will be demonstrating for you today. Right. So for this experiment and for this fun class, what you will need is just a paper plate or a palette. I'm going to recommend that you find an acrylic retarder. Most of the houses internationally create their own acrylic retarder. There's great brands, there's brands that is not so great. I personally don't enjoy working with acrylic retarder a lot, but for this class it might make your life a little bit easier because it sort of slows down the drying time of your acrylic paint, giving you a little bit more time to play and to create texture in it. The disadvantage is if you add too much of your acrylic retarder to your paint, if the ratio isn't right, your paint will take forever to dry and it will remain sticky. And also after playing with your texture implements, you will have to set this aside to dry and it will take a bit longer. So just be aware of that. But in countries where it is summer or it is very hot, or you have a day in your studio where the paint dries too fast on you, acrylic retarder might make your life a little bit easier. And that's also why initially I'm not working on a massive board, because drying times will be an issue. So without further ado, I'm just going to use ordinary student grade titanium white. This is really not the best quality out there, but it is good enough for this experiment and for this class. So I am going to just dispense a little bit of my white paint. Let me use my beautiful new palette knife. Isn't it gorgeous? I spoiled myself. I think we need enough though. So let's rather take out enough paint. Now the ratio of this retarder to paint, according to my instructions here for this particular product, is 1 part of acrylic retarder to 4 parts of paint. So you can see you need very, very little. So I'm going to just add a little bit like that to my mixture, and then I'm just going to mix it in with my palette knife. You can also use a brush, of course. Now the whole idea about this class is that we sort of familiarize ourselves with the possibilities of using texture as another means in our abstraction to create interesting textures and line work on our painting that only is provided with paint, you know. So we have a little bit of a drawing feeling going. And what I've got here on the side for you guys is an ordinary kitchen fork. I'm going to show you guys that. This is a chopstick, the back of an ordinary paintbrush. This is like a wooden skewer that I've pulled out of my kitchen. And then I've gone ahead and bought some store-bought implements as well that we will play with later to create some texture. Right, so if your foundation is dry, you've mixed your paint, I want you to take just an ordinary flat brush. Let's activate it with some water and just get the excess water off our brush. So we've activated our brush. It's not dripping with water, but it's ready to take some paint. And just mix this again really good. I'm afraid this might not be enough, eh? I want to put a thick enough coat of paint on this black now with the retarder in it, so that we have a nice wet base to play with. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more of my white. And that's also why I think student grade paint is great, because when you experiment and play, you don't want to use your most expensive art supplies that costs a lot of dollars to do this until you've got the hang of it. Now here in South Africa today it is raining, so I trust that that little bit of retarder in here is going to be enough for me. So we're going to go ahead and apply a fairly thick layer of the white on top of the black. And I'm not particularly worried about blending it all in. I also think it's a good idea to have a misting bottle handy should you feel like the paint is drying on you too fast. Now for this first block, we are going to be playing with some flower shapes. Now I'm going to take my skewer and I'm just going to draw some interesting circle shapes. Now you can see, because the paint is not drying fast, it is allowing me the time to draw some interesting shapes on my canvas. And I also like it when shapes come on and off my canvas. And you see the bottom layer of the black shining through, so it provides us with a maximum contrast. So that is really interesting. So then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw in some texture lines into these circles. And the idea is to work fast enough so that this paint doesn't dry on you. So don't dilly-dally. Don't take too much time to think about what it is that you want to add to this particular layer. So the retarder is helping you, but it is starting to dry because the paint is open and exposed. Another thing I want you to be mindful of is not to be too aggressive with this layer. You can be firm so that you can scratch some of the paint off, but I don't want you to be so violent and hard that you tear the page. Right, that looks pretty. So I'm going to use my fork now, and I'm going to play with that ability to have nice even lines to make some marks on this page. Not overthinking, but trying to be artistic enough with it to have a nice effect. And mindful that everything is still wet, so if you draw a line through it, it will be there. I'm going to switch back to my, let's use the back of my paintbrush and see what that does for me. Okay, so that's a bit of a thicker line. That's nice. So I'm going to go ahead now, and while the paint is wet, I'm going to draw in some squigglies in this particular zone. Every now and then it might be a good idea to just wipe your tool from any paint that it's picked up. So I like making random marks that's not too precise or too pretty. Obviously pretty marks always is pretty, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. So areas where the paint is thin, it might dry a little bit faster on you, and areas where the paint is thick, it might take a little bit longer. I'm going to add more there. Awesome. Let's go ahead and repeat that this side. So I'm using the design element of repetition here to help create interesting aspects to this texture. So we're playing with circles and with lines to create an interesting piece. Here you can see it's dried a little bit already, and that's great. Okay, so this is my first exercise. I feel that I've achieved success. I've used the retarder to slow the drying of my acrylic paint, and I've used various tools to make some marks in the wet paint, allowing the dark first underlayer or underpainting to provide me with some visual interest. I think we can add a few more lines. Here and there. because this is going to add some fun later when we paint over this. So this is also one way of placing your main subject on your canvas. Instead of drawing it in with chalk, you can, if you're confident, or if you're really doing an abstract piece where balance and proportion is maybe not the main design elements, and we're going to be playing with that idea as well today. Right, I'm going to allow that to dry, and when we come back I'm going to do something similar on this side, but we are going to be using a different tool and a different shape.